Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, and a new one drawn by the great Mark Churay, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am here once again, I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 644, and my God, the Snyder Week continues. You know, I didn't think I would have, I didn't think I'd have more to talk about when it came to the Snyder Cut, but there's always more to talk about, and I wanted to start before I get into today's topic at hand. I wanted to read something that kind of summed up how I feel about everything in terms of the Justice League, in terms of what's happening here, in terms of fandom and all that. But first, I just wanted to start out. Many people who have watched this show for a while have heard me talk about my first comic book love was the Justice League. It was the first ongoing comic I ever purchased. I had bought comic books before, but it was the first comic that I followed, that I kept buying. And my mom actually made sure I got the new issue from a spindle rack where I was growing up. This was the first issue of Justice League of America that I remember buying for myself. This is Justice League number 114 from 1974. Now, what was interesting, this is one of these 100-page giant-size issues, and why I loved this comic was, if you can see on the bottom there, it was Crisis on Earth 3, and that's what I loved. And it was the first time I knew who the Justice Society was, really. I'd watched Super Friends, and I'd seen cartoons, but I wasn't really aware of continuity. And this issue had this, it was a reprint story, and it was all about, on Earth 3, they had the Crime Syndicate instead of the Justice League, where you had evil counterparts of our familiar characters. And I loved it. I had seen the mirror universe of Star Trek, so I knew what Earth 3 was. I'd seen Mirror Mirror, obviously. So I loved the Justice League from then on out. And I probably, you know, my mom would make sure, because obviously I was 7, and I think I bought this comic when I was going down to Gearhart, where my Aunt Caroline lived. Gearhart was in Oregon next to Seaside. It's a seaside community, but it was next to Seaside, which was kind of a, they had like a boardwalk there, and I loved going there as a kid. But we were going to see my Auntie Caroline, and that's when I bought this comic. And I loved it. I must have read this comic 1,000 times. I swear to God. Well, why do I bring this up? Well, the lovely Emma Bannon, who is, of course, in the UK, who is a big member of the Post-Geek Singularity, alerted me to a Twitter thread today that I want to share with you from renowned comic writer, Gail Simone. Now, I understand Gail Simone has been a controversial figure for some, but I respect her talent, and I've read a lot of things of Gail Simone's that I loved. But Gail Simone told a story on Twitter in a thread that I would like to share with you, and Gail Simone began by showing her first Justice League comic, which was actually Justice League 100. And here is that issue. Now, I went back when I was collecting. I actually had this issue as well, but I had to go back and get it because it had already come out when I started reading Justice League. But I wanted to share with you this amazing Twitter thread that Gail Simone posted today about the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Well, it leads into the Snyder Cut, but it began with this image. And if I might share it with you, I thought it was very relevant to what's going on. So here's what Gail Simone says. Actually, you know what? Why don't I leave this? Let me leave this comic up for the beginning of this so I can kind of, it'll lead you into it. Gail Simone says, again, this is in her Twitter thread that was published beginning at 8:16 this morning. Okay, let me tell you about the Justice League of America. There won't be any Snyder Cut spoilers. This is about the concept. When I was a kid, I lived on a farm, and we were poor. All I wanted to do was read, so I read everything I could find. But I read a lot I didn't love because it was there. My mom took me to a garage sale. There was a little stack of comics being sold for almost nothing. I saw an older comic, and I just couldn't look away. I begged to get it. I didn't know who the characters were, and it was this comic, Justice League 100. I fell in love with comics that night. I read that comic an untold number of times. I'm ashamed to say I cut out some of the art and put it on my wall. I had to know who all the characters were. I made little note cards to add information as I learned about them. I didn't know anything about comics. It was an older comic. It had been in someone's collection, and it was the first part of a continued story. So I rode my bike every day to the drugstore in our little town, many miles from home, to see if they got the next chapter. I didn't know. I thought you just went to the store and asked for the next bit of the story. Anyway, that comic was my Pokemon, my Star Wars. It made me a comics fan forever. It was a big team-up issue, tons of characters, and I had to know them all. So for me, this comic has always been the Justice League of America. I never got over it. It was the comic I had to check out even as I grew up and went to college and got married. It was always the Justice League of America. One of the things I loved was how epic the characters were. The Marvel style, I grew to love that later, but as a kid, I didn't like to see my heroes squabbling all the time. I had enough of that in real life. My heroes were Superman, Batman, Flash, and yes, Wonder Woman. When I was in college, we were poor again, and it was often a choice between necessities and comics. I would usually choose comics. To this day, I'm more starstruck meeting JLA creators than movie stars. We'll probably never grow out of that. Flash forward to years later, I end up a comic writer at DC, which is already an impossible dream. One day, very early in my career, the editor-in-chief at the time, Mike Carlin, calls me and asks if I would like to write 6 issues of Justice League. I could barely speak. I got through the conversation and finally remembered to ask, okay, who's going to draw this? And Mike said, how do you feel about Jose Garcia Lopez? And I absolutely lost it. I had 2 favorite artists in the world, and Jose was one of them. I'd just like to point out right now, ladies and gentlemen, that indeed Jose Luis Garcia Lopez is also one of my favorite artists. He drew Teen Titans, and he also drew my beloved Atari Force. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez is a god of comic art. He's the artists other artists get tongue-tied even talking about, and he was going to draw my story, my JLA story. I've written a lot of comics since then, and I'm very proud of almost all of them. But my favorite artist on my favorite book for my favorite company with my favorite characters, if I never wrote another comic after that, I would still think I was the luckiest fan ever. It turned out so beautiful. It's still a comic I just reread just to look at the art. And Jose was lovely, and I got to write Wonder Woman fighting Flash to save his life, and John creating bio armor, and well, I was very, very happy. Here's another cover to that story. And there it is. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez's great art. Right there. I'm sorry I didn't capture that. Years later, I got to write an episode of my favorite superhero animated series ever, Justice League Unlimited. It still felt like a direct line to that crumpled comic I found at a garage sale as a kid. I was so happy. All of this is just to say something that may seem a little silly to some people, but not to me. Justice League was the moment that changed my life for the better. It made childhood bearable and adulthood a joy. I take the JLA seriously. I know that for a lot of people, maybe most people, the Avengers is hipper and all that, and I do love those movies, but the JLA felt like the heroes I wanted most in the world. Flash forward again to the theatrical cut of Justice League the movie. I liked it. I didn't hate it. But it didn't feel like the JLA to me, despite incredible casting. It was entertaining and frustrating, but it felt like a shadow, like something the JLA really never was. Last night, I was excited, but cautiously so, to see the Zack Snyder version. I haven't kept up with most of the drama. I just didn't want my vision of the JLA to be all mixed up in that stuff. I got a preview invitation. My family gathered, and we were making a night of it. As many of you know, Microsoft had a massive outage, and the film that we scheduled to watch at 3 didn't start for us until after 11. I was tired from deadlines. It felt like kind of a bad omen. We figured we'd watch an hour and see the rest the next day. 10 minutes in, we were so hooked, that wasn't even an option. We watched the whole thing until 3 a.m. And truthfully, all I've been thinking about since is watching it again. It's a different take on the JLA. It's not the perfect gods and goddesses that they are often portrayed as, and that's a good thing. Every character has an arc. Some stuff that didn't work in the other cut comes out as the best part of the full version. It has heart and scope, and it's beautiful to look at and often achingly bittersweet at times. But it is not dour. It is not cynical. I don't want to say any more specifics, but I loved it. It feels finally like the other side of the coin to the Marvel films in a good way. There's a lot I want to talk about. I have a million thoughts on it. But my advice is put aside all the internet nonsense and watch it with an open mind. A lot that I was nervous about was simply obliterated by the finished product. And that's a good thing. Like I said, the JLA is the biggest thing in comics to me and always has been. And like every kid in the pre-MCU era, I could only imagine a great film based on my favorite comic ever coming to be. Well, it did. It came to be. And this Justice League of America fan is a believer. That's it. See the Snyder Cut, and make up your own mind. But try not to let all of this irrelevant baggage cloud your enjoyment. It so exceeded my expectations, and I know I won't be alone in that. I want to talk about it so bad, but for now, thumbs up. Thumbs way up. I know a bunch of people are going to bring nonsense to discussion of this movie. Don't let them ruin it for you. That's it. Thanks for listening. I am very happy. I hope you fans will be too. Love to all the JLA fans and also the people who made this movie. Oh, and finally, the Amazons. That's it. That's what Gail Simone had to say. And when I read that, I thought to myself, you know, of all the things that I've read about Snyder's JLA cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League, everything that I've read about, and I've read everything. I think I've read every article, every review. What Gail Simone tweeted out in this thread was absolutely my favorite thing. It was my favorite review. Because I think, at least I'm hoping, because I felt the same way that Gail Simone did. All the way back, I mean, she might have beaten me by 14 issues, but it was JLA 114, it was this comic that made me fall in love with the Justice League of America. And when I was a kid, I'll tell you, we had the Mego figures, we had Super Friends, the comics. I love the Justice League of America. They were my first superhero loves, more so than any Marvel comic. And reading Gail Simone's Justice League thread, I'm like, man, she and I, kindred spirits. And I, too, never thought I'd see a Justice League movie that wasn't great. I couldn't wait to see George Miller's Justice League Mortal. And when I saw Justice League in 2017, it was one of the more crushing moments, crushing times I'd spent in a theater. So I have been very excited to see, and I am a fan of Zack Snyder's vision of the characters because it is mythic, because it's different than the MCU. I don't necessarily think it's better, but I do think Zack Snyder has served the way those characters have lived in my head since I was 7. They were larger than life. They were mythic. They were gods to me. I was a big fan, and I have been my whole life. And it wasn't until I read Gail Simone's thread today that I'm like, okay, that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, what is somebody who's a lifelong fan of these characters, who actually had read the comics when they were young, what did they think of the film? So, again, I've not seen it, but after reading that review, I thought, wow, all right. Awesome. Can't wait. And then, you know, all of the stuff, like as Gail Simone pointed out, there's all kinds of back and forth. There's all kinds of people that are going to poo-poo this. There's even the people that I kind of feel bad about. A lot of people really worked hard to create the original version of Justice League. And I hope their efforts, the effects people, all the technical people, the actors as well, everybody, yes, even Joss Whedon, who was put in a position that had to be one of the more difficult positions that any director in the history of filmmaking was put in. I know he made money. I know all that. Still, an impossible position with pressure I can't even begin to imagine. But I don't want anyone to forget that there were still, and a lot of the same people that worked on the Snyder Cut did continue to work on the 2017 version. I don't want the efforts of those people to be thought of in vain or dismissed, because they're owed something as well. But I am very excited to see Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I'm very interested and curious as to the pop culture fan event that it has become. What are the ramifications of it? What are people thinking about in terms of where the Snyder Cut, what does it mean to you? I'm fascinated. Like I said yesterday, I quipped on the show. I said, you know, it would be really interesting to get a group of diehards who've been with the Snyder Cut movement since the beginning to get their post-mortem, maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month down the road. And someone picked up on that, and I've seen many people have tweeted at me that they'd be down. So we will absolutely be organizing something along those lines. I don't know if I'd want to do it live or we pre-record it and I broadcast it on the channel. Maybe doing it live so people could participate. But anyway, of course, one of the first articles I've read about, now that it's a reality, now that it's here, people have been talking about this for a while. This is not a new sentiment, but I read this article. I mentioned it yesterday, but I figured I'd just jump right into it. It was published on the Time magazine website, time.com, yesterday. It's written by Eliana Doctorman, and the title, you can't really see the title. The title of this article is, "The Snyder Cut is a better version of Justice League, but it sets a dangerous precedent." Does it? Look, admittedly, I put the word terribly dangerous. More of a clickbait headline, but anyway, I just want to get into this. Director Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, out March 18th on HBO Max, is way better than the original version released in theaters in 2017. It had to be. The theatrical cut of the DC Comics superhero movie was a dissonant mismatch of two radically different directorial styles that left audiences confused, critics unimpressed, and the studio reportedly at a financial loss. During filming, Snyder left the project after the sudden and tragic death of his daughter, and another director, Joss Whedon of Avengers fame, took over. Whedon reshot much of the movie, and whether by poor communication or studio interference, the plot became incomprehensible, and Whedon sprinkled quips throughout to try and brighten his predecessor's signature gloomy tone to the consternation of Snyder's most devoted fans. The new cut of Justice League, dubbed the Snyder Cut by fans on the internet, lasts 4 exhausting hours? Exhausting? Methinks not. But Snyder uses his doubled runtime wisely. Whereas Whedon's version gestured at vague, tear-jerky backstories, Snyder gives each hero personal stakes, particularly Ray Fisher's Cyborg. His strained relationship with his father becomes the much-needed heart of the film. The villain Steppenwolf, too, gets a motive, redeeming himself to his villainous family. The CGI battles look better and are longer and bloodier, if that's your thing. No longer tonally bipolar, the film is one man's vision for better or for worse. It's uniformly dark and not just figuratively. Snyder transformed several daytime scenes into murky nighttime ones. Points for consistency, if not for visual clarity. And he has said he is donating some of the proceeds to suicide prevention programs. Snyder turned a bad movie into a less bad movie. In a pandemic when blockbusters are scarce, maybe that's welcome. But the journey here was fraught. A group of fans operating under the banner #Release the Snyder Cut bullied Warner Brothers into giving Snyder $70 million to remake the film. That's chump change for a superhero movie, but could have funded a lovely new original film. This wasn't a quaint letter-writing campaign. While some fans innocently used the hashtag in hopes of getting a better movie, a toxic contingent spammed producers, critics, and fans of the rival Marvel Cinematic Universe with angry comments and threats. By capitulating to fans who employed dubious tactics to get what they want, Warner Brothers may have set a dangerous precedent. If this is the future of filmmaking, who's really in control? Those fans didn't operate in a vacuum. Snyder encouraged them by creating social media accounts dedicated to what his version would have looked like. He used the hashtag himself, as did stars Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot. Snyder has said he refuses to watch Whedon's version, and he's maintained that most of his fans, with whom rests the future of his filmmaking career, are not toxic. Snyder had once been the architect of the future of DC superhero films, an auteur anointed to pick up the mantle from Christopher Nolan following his highly influential Dark Knight trilogy. By the early 2010s, Warner Brothers was playing catch-up to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Whedon had cemented the tenor of those movies, quip, punch, with the first two Avengers films. It was a little bit more than that, I would say. In stark and purposeful contrast to Nolan's self-serious Batman. Snyder grabbed the football where Nolan left it and sprinted ahead with even more dour fictional world in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. The 2014 Lego movie pokes fun at his and Nolan's take on the brooding superheroes with a Batman theme song. Darkness, no parents, super rich, kind of makes it better. That's the essence of every Snyder film. In his movies, Batman's sole personality trait is anger. That his parents were murdered, that the Joker bamboozled him, that Superman is stronger than he is. Unlike Nolan, who wrestled with political questions in his Batman films, successfully or not, Snyder's movies feint toward depth. They've also struggled with critics and floundered at the box office. Warner Brothers has largely scrapped his vision for the future of the DC movies. Superman and Batman are both getting reboots with new actors. DC's most successful films at the box office, Wonder Woman and Aquaman, boast a decidedly more buoyant tone, both of whom I'd like to point out were cast by Zack Snyder. Snyder isn't slated for any more superhero films and is working on an adaptation of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. Until recently, Warner Brothers had no motive to release a version of Justice League that sets up future sequels that will never manifest, but those calculations changed with the pandemic as the company became reliant on its streaming service HBO Max rather than on theatrical releases. During the Snyder Cut on a streaming service would create buzz and recruit subscribers. Debuting the Snyder Cut on a streaming service would create buzz and recruit subscribers. It's easy to see why Snyder's style resonates with a certain contingent online. Some of Snyder's fans pilloried Marvel movies, and Whedon in particular, claiming those films are for kids. In recent months, several actors, including Justice League's Ray Fisher, have accused Whedon of bullying on set, adding fuel to the online fire. By contrast, they believe Snyder offers an adult version of comics, bleaker and bloodier, which justifies their continued obsession with stories they first read in childhood. The ugliest subset of these fans fetishize the good old days, when heroes were primarily white, straight, and male. Some seek to protect that nostalgic but exclusionary version of storytelling at all costs. Trolls within other fandoms have often deployed the same toxic tactics as hashtag Snyder Cut fans to drive women and people of color offline. When female gamers push for more women and more fully clad women in video games, disgruntled men clinging to the sexist games of their youth dox them. When an all-female Ghostbusters premiered in 2016, fans accused the creators of ruining their childhood and drove the movie's only black star, Leslie Jones, offline with racist and sexist vitriol. When Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi killed off Luke Skywalker, Star Wars fans who'd grown up with Luke's face on their lunchboxes fumed over the decision to backstage older white characters and usher in a younger, more diverse cast. They harassed one of those cast members, Kelly Marie Tran, until she too quit social media. And DC superhero fans tried to file bad reviews en masse to lower the Rotten Tomatoes fan scores of Marvel movies Black Panther and Captain Marvel, forcing Rotten Tomatoes to forbid ratings before movie debuts. It's not a coincidence that those were the first solo outings for a black and a female superhero in that franchise. These fans have found success. Bomb threats kept prominent female gamers from speaking at events. Jason Reitman is making another Ghostbusters sequel, saying he's handing the franchise back to the fans. And J.J. Abrams largely retconned the events of Last Jedi in his follow-up, The Rise of Skywalker, sidelining Kelly Marie Tran's character in the story. Greenlighting films based on fan campaigns may sound like a democratic way to make movies. But in reality, the power is not with the people, but with a small, loud contingent of fans willing to spew hatred. The Snyder Cut, new and improved as it may be, is the latest reward for their bad behavior. But it's also perhaps the inevitable conclusion of a saga set amid an industry in which money talks louder than even trolls. Money, of course, can also talk in the form of box office receipts, which is why, following the success of Wonder Woman and Black Panther, we're now set to see more of Harley Quinn and a Black Superman movie. If cash is going to set the agenda, let's hope that agenda at least moves us forward, rather than trending in place. You know, I've been a fan all my life. Since I was a little kid. We used to have these events in Seattle put on by the One Reel Vaudeville Show. And it was the Sci-Fi Expo. And it was at the Seattle Center Coliseum. Well, not the Coliseum. The Seattle Center where the Coliseum was and where the Space Needle was. And I met Harlan Ellison there. I met Gene Roddenberry there. I was a kid. My dad took me. One year I couldn't go. I was terribly sick. So my dad went anyway. And he bought me a giant painting that somebody had done, and I used that painting in my Super 8 movies with my Star Wars figures. Han Solo Escapes, because on it was a painted sunset, and it looked great. So I used it. Been a fan all my life. I've never once had a bad experience with other fans at any fan events. Never. All I ever did was have people, I mean, I was a kid too, and I was going to events by myself when I was, 11 and 12 because I could take the bus. My parents, my friend Jeff Swafford had us riding the public transportation system when we were 10 years old. We used to be able to buy bus passes for 50 cents in Seattle. And you could ride all day, and he would plot out these elaborate bus trips. We were 10, and we were going to like SeaTac Airport, or we were going to the Ballard Locks. We went all over the city. And our parents, I don't know if any kid could do that today. I don't really know why. We never had a problem. And crime is down way more than it was when I was a kid. But luckily, we got to do those things. And we were fully independent. We were free-range children. We were free city children. We were all over the place. But I never had bad experiences with fans. And also, I should say that while I found certain things to be disappointing, there was an attitude that we just didn't get much of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, at least not as much as we wanted. So whenever you would get a movie, even if it was disappointing and you didn't love it, you tried to love it. You wanted to love it. And if it didn't, like, I remember 1983. 1983, not great. Not a great year for films. I think we got Superman 3. maybe it was 84, that Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone came out with the Overdog and Molly Ringwald. And you got excited about these movies because we were post-1982, the greatest summer of science fiction, fantasy, and horror ever. And then, of course, after that, it became very... If you were a fan, if you were like... to me, an OG fan is somebody who saw Star Wars in the theater when they were kids. It led us someplace. And I was already a fan. Usually people that saw Star Wars around my age, 10 or so, we were kind of already fans, but it cemented our fandom into place. I mean, I'd seen Logan's Run in the theater the year before. I was watching Star Trek and The Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and all the movies that were on Channel 11 Sci-Fi Theater. So I was a diehard by the time Star Wars came out. But what Star Wars did was it instilled the desire to really make movies. I mean, I already had that desire, but it seemed so out there, like I didn't really know anything about it. But if you've ever seen that Making of Star Wars documentary, where in it, not only does Mark Hamill host it, but they show clips of, or maybe, you know what, maybe it was the Empire Strikes Back documentary when I was 13. I don't remember now, I'm thinking about it. But there were clips from other movies, like The Thief of Baghdad, and I'm like, oh, I got to see that. So it made me, it turned my young childhood fandom for all this stuff into a desire to make it something more. Well, cut to more than 40 years later, we're here now in our internet era. And I think one of the things, whenever I read this stuff about how everyone turns toxic fandom into, oh, it becomes alt-right, or it's all about people that are bigoted, or this, that, and the other thing. Well, I don't know if that's bared out. I certainly haven't experienced it. I mean, as a fan, I've met people of all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, all over the place. I was at one of the first science fiction, actually, I think it was the first Star Trek convention ever held in Paris. After Free Enterprise came out, they invited Mark Altman and I, and it was the first time I'd been to Paris. And I met all kinds of people there. And I've been lucky. But I think what people forget whenever I read these articles that they go into toxic fandom and they portray fans in a bad light. Look, I think there's people who are toxic everywhere. It's not just a subset of fandom. When people are passionate about something, they tend to, I think people can be toxic in any walk of life with anything. But one of the things that I think that is often forgotten is that where all of this comes from is the fact that in this day and age, the world that we live in, the things that people believe in, the things that they look to give them comfort or to hold them over in times of trouble. Certainly I did. I mean, Star Trek was always something when I felt I didn't have prescription drugs, I didn't take any. I still don't. I've never really taken. I think the only prescription drug I ever took in my life was tetracycline for pimples. I had zits on my back, so I had to take more showers and took tetracycline. That was it. I've never had any other kind of prescription medication in my life, and I would look to things like Star Trek or Star Wars or movies to tide me over, to make me feel better, And what happened as I was a kid, there was nobody who was into it as much as I was. And now, as time has gone by and people have become fans, and we now live in a world where science fiction, fantasy, horror, in all of its myriad forms, movies, video games, graphic novels, television, comics, whatever, is now ubiquitous. We now live in the post-geek singularity, where all of this is mainstream. Everybody has something that they love. And I think the root cause of all of it is this idea that, well, it isn't that fans are demanding necessarily what they want. I mean, there is some of that, but for the most part, what it really is people want the integrity of what they grew up with, the integrity of the stories that we're getting, to be maintained. And it's not that somebody wants a white hero. It's not about race. Look, people were not bullying Kelly Marie Tran because she was an Asian woman. They were bullying Kelly Marie Tran because people have a really hard time, first of all, disassociating the actress or the actor from the part they play. But the character wasn't worthy, wasn't written well enough to be liked by the fan base. And the fan base is left bewildered. How is it when there are so many great Star Wars stories, even in video games, in comics, that the creators of the flagship Star Wars get it wrong? And it's bewildering to people. And when people, I know that for me, it happened when I watched Star Trek '09. And I was left scratching my head. The most expensive Star Trek movie ever made by a wide margin at that point. And they go back and they tell a supercharged version of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy that, as somebody who literally grew up with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, watching them age and die, at least their fictional components die at the time. And when I watched Star Trek '09, I'm like, how did this happen? I know it's just entertainment, and probably we shouldn't care as much as we do. But Star Trek had meant so much to me in my life, in the place of the fact that I'm not a religious person, even though I was raised in the Jewish faith and went to Sunday school and was bar mitzvahed and learned Hebrew and all of that. It didn't connect with me as much as Star Trek did. Like, to me, Star Trek was my religion. I learned morality. I learned what kind of a person I wanted to be from the people I saw on the screen. They were touchstones. And I think whether you love Tolkien, whether you love Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Star Trek, whether you love Sailor Moon, whether you love Miyazaki's work, whether you love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, whether you love the Twilight films, whether you love Outlander, it doesn't matter what it is that you internalize and love. When they become successful, what happens is they get taken out of the hands of the creators that made them, that imbued them with whatever it is that you loved about them in the first place. And they become turned over to their new, literally, corporate overlords. And the integrity, look, if someone's going to fail with something, I would rather have it be the creator than somebody who's brought on as a gun for hire. Look, there's a lot of people that really, and I was one of them, that really didn't like the prequel trilogy when it came out. I was baffled by how George Lucas was able to come up with that. And I finally reconciled myself as an old school OG fan that the prequel trilogy are bad movies, but good Star Wars, if that makes any sense. And to me, it's not that the prequel trilogy was bad, it was the execution. George Lucas would, I think the humanity, you just don't believe that there's, the human characters just don't feel real the way that the original Star Wars characters felt real. And some of it you could chalk up to the fact you could say, okay, well, Star Wars, as I've always pointed out, Star Wars is a blue-collar movie. It's about a farmer, it's about a truck driver, and it's about a retired veteran of foreign wars who get together and they kind of go off on a cross-country adventure. Whereas the prequel trilogies are all about royalty and special people. They're not salt-of-the-earth Americans the way that the original Star Wars is about that. So it has a whole different feel, and because of that, it's hard to relate to the characters. Add to the fact that the way they're written, the way that Lucas directed them, and the fact that they're surrounded in a sea of digital unreality, it's hard to watch those movies and get into them. Whereas you watch Star Wars, you know Luke Skywalker, you know Han Solo, you even know spunky Princess Leia, even though she represents the aristocratic side of things. But I think that what we're really angry about, what fans get most angry about, is when we see these things that we love turn out to not be good. And I think it becomes bewildering with all of the people that are making these things and all the money they're throwing at them. It's like, well, wait a minute. How did this happen? And what was very interesting about Zack Snyder's Justice League, I think more than anything else, anything that's come out, I mean, people bitch and moan and complain about The Last Jedi. I liked it. I have problems with it. Is it a perfect film? No. But there are things about it I quite enjoy. It's my favorite of the Disney sequel movies, by the way. I hated Force Awakens, and I couldn't stand The Rise of Skywalker. I'm not a fan of... All of that goes back to J.J. Abrams. But at least I found... Look, is there a lot of things that put off? I thought the things at the beginning, the telephone joke at the beginning of The Last Jedi, I'm like, really? This is so colloquial and stupid. Why am I watching this? But there's other things in it that I take great pleasure in. And I'll freely admit that on this channel. But what's interesting, as much as people don't like The Last Jedi, they know that the blame is placed squarely on Rian Johnson, and they blame Kathleen Kennedy. But Rian Johnson did write and direct it. It is his vision. And whether you like The Last Jedi or not, I like the fact at least it is the vision of an auteurist filmmaker in Rian Johnson. I know people are like, rah, that guy, auteur. Look, the point I'm making is whether you like the movie or not, it's one writer-director who's working inside the Star Wars milieu. What happened with the Snyder Cut more than any other thing, and I see the Snyder Cut and I see what happened to Justice League, it's a metaphor, it's a graphic metaphor of what's happened to all of our franchises when somebody tries to revive them and it goes badly. When somebody, and in the case of the Snyder Cut, the fault is squarely on the studio. Their expectations weren't being met. They had unrealistic expectations. They were looking at other things such as why aren't we making Disney money? They had an AT&T merger they were worried about. Everything that was going on at the studio level, where the control was not about the movie Justice League. It was about all of these other things. And really, a studio has one job: make movies that people love. And they decided in the middle of it all, using the tragedy in Zack Snyder's family as an excuse, and Zack was able to use it to get out, but they used it as a way to get rid of him. So what we were given was probably the most graphic example of corporate, I mean, call it what you will, but it was a corporation making a bunch of wrong-headed decisions that led to a product that was inferior to what it should have been. And in a way, it's kind of a metaphor for, in a way, I know it's going to seem, but it is the Justice League. It's a metaphor for everything wrong with the United States and maybe wrong with modern culture. I know it's a stretch, but if you think about it, it kind of is, because movies are a collision of art and commerce. I say this all the time. There's a lot of money at stake. A lot of money. But the thing about it is for all the money that they spend on movies, you can't make a good movie by committee. Movies are already a collective act. It requires the talents of a great many people to make a great movie. But the thing is, the best people who work on films, they all know their jobs better than anybody who works in a corporation is going to know how to make films. And when you're working at the studio level, I can assure you, you have the best people that have ever been assembled to work on those movies. There is nobody who's working on studio movies that does a half-assed job. Nobody, because they've already been weeded out. So you've got, I know, not weeded out, but weeded out. So you've got the best people imaginable working on these films. And you hope that your creative lead, which is always your director, because all these decisions that everyone else is making has to be filtered through the vision of the director, because that's what you want. That's how the best movies are made. Now, these can be cantankerous relationships. There can be a push and pull. A lot of movies were made, great movies were made under the incredible stress of the creative process of making a film. But I will tell you this, it never works. I mean, a great movie, I guess someone's going to throw Wizard of Oz or even Gone with the Wind. What about Victor Fleming and all it? Okay, there's always an exception to the rule. But for the most part, you can't have that kind of change at the top and have something. The Snyder Cut is a response to something that was so very obviously botched. You had two movies with a certain vision, two movies that were not financial disasters. They just didn't make as much money because they cost too much, and the expectations put on those films by the studio were not earned. So what the version of Justice League, when it came out in 2017, it to me is it was a shining example of everything that could go wrong. It did go wrong from the corporate level, and I blame the studio all the way on down. Now, the thing about the Snyder Cut that we're getting is that Zack Snyder coming back in, metaphorically. It was, imagine if, you see the movie Tucker. What if Tucker would be able to come back into the American auto industry and incorporate some of those innovations that he was going to put in his own cars that the corporate American auto industry destroyed him, rather than look at him and go, why don't we elevate him and bring him in and have him manufacture these cars and see if they sell? They saw him as a threat. They destroyed him. Well, they didn't destroy Zack Snyder, but they came in and they delivered a movie to a fan base who wants to love it. No, there's no group of fans, the fans that love science fiction, fantasy, and horror that are eagerly awaiting each one of these movies. They rely on those fans to show up, but there's nobody that's more forgiving. We put up with a lot. Like, things have to go horribly awry for us to get really pissed. Well, the original theatrical version of Justice League opens with a horrible phone footage of Henry Cavill's Superman that doesn't look like Superman because somebody thought it was a great idea to have him come back and reshoot scenes when he had a mustache for the making of Mission Impossible Fallout. What brain trust thought that was a good idea? From a production standpoint, the last thing you want to have to do is use CG to color correct and visually correct your main actor's face. That's like, anybody who knows anything about making movies, you don't do that. You don't ruin an actor's face. Why do you think you have hair and makeup people? That alone was one of the decisions that I'm thinking, whoever thought that was a good idea, get them out of there. What you know of filmmaking is not enough to make something like that happen. So when you watch Justice League, the theatrical cut, and that's how it starts, I just sat there and I'm like, you lost me. You lost me. How do you allow that to happen to an actor? Like, how do you do that? The first thing I've told anybody on this show who wants to know about movie making, one of the very first things you can do, one of the very first most important things you can do, besides hiring a caterer, people joke, they laugh, they think I'm joking, I'm not. Hair and makeup people. Your hair and makeup people are essential. It doesn't matter whether you're making a movie for $50,000 or $500,000 or $500 million. Some of the most important people that you have on a set is your hair and makeup people. Why? Because your actors have to feel that when they leave the makeup room or the trailer, they got to feel they look good. You never want an actor to walk on set and feel they don't look good. Now, when I say that, they might just have come out of a body pit and be drenched in blood. But the hair and makeup people are going to make sure they look really good drenched in blood, that it's not going to look half-assed. Plus, hair and makeup people they're like the first line of psychological defense to keep your actors happy. Trust me on this. Don't skimp. But what do? They compromised Henry Cavill's face when they did the theatrical version of Justice League. This is like 101. The fact that they would do this, because it's amazing to me that decision was made right then and there. I know that nothing good could ever come of this. Nothing good. And so, while yes, are there people in this world that should be more mature? Yes. Are there people in this world that use social media as a battering ram? Yes. But you know what? That's the world we live in. That's our society. Is it right? No. Should fans badger people? No. Was it Kelly Marie Tran's fault that you didn't like the way her character was written in Last Jedi? No. You know, in a way, Kelly Marie Tran represented all of us. It was every fan who ever dreamed of being in a Star Wars movie. She was that fan, and it was unfortunate what happened to her. And I don't advocate anybody. That kind of behavior is it's just, how about this? It's just not polite. You know, I mean, my mom and my father taught me, just be polite when you go out into public. Now, I have been salty on social media. I've said bad things. I've said things that are very impolite. And occasionally I've said them directly to people. And we should change that. We're not going to anytime soon, but we should. We should be better. We should be nicer. Because as I've said on this show a million times, there's only one of each of us that has ever existed on this planet. We will never come again. In all of human history, in the entire infinitude of the universe, there's only one of each of us. First time I ever heard that, by the way, was in the Star Trek episode Balance of Terror. But it's true. So that makes each one of us the most precious commodity that exists in this universe. And the fact that we treat each other badly, and human beings have been doing that to one another for thousands of years. I don't see it happening or stopping anytime soon, but it's something maybe you could stop and remember. That every single human being that isn't you, and you yourself, are miraculous, that you exist at all. And I think for that reason, we should treat each other better. If no other reason, think about that. But, and our fan community is much better, I know from this show, is much better when we are nice to each other, when we have civil discourse. But I understand. The Snyder Cut, more than anything, it was a shining example of wrong decisions, wrong-headed decisions, decisions that were made based on something other than the good of the film. Warner Brothers' job, their one job in life, the studio, is to make movies that are good, that appeal to audiences, that audiences love, so they pay money to go see them, and the movies make a lot of money. If a studio interferes in the making of a film and turns it into shite, like they did with the decisions that were made with the original Justice League, well then, they're not doing their job. And I think fans react to that. Like, it's hard when you want to love something, and it's not that fans are demanding. They're not saying, give us something that is out of the realm of it. It's not that it's fans want things. What they want is for the product that they buy to be good. At the end of the day, that's what fans want. And you can't have it both ways. You can't just assume the fans are going to show up and that they're going to see anything. No. Fans are the most discerning of your audience. And they're the people that are your front line of wanting to love it. Now, I'm not saying you should bend, if you make story choices in movies, should you bend to what the fans want? Do I think that fans should be allowed to dictate what movies are made? No. Do I think fans should be allowed to dictate the decisions filmmakers make? No. I don't think fans know enough about the process of movie making to allow anybody in to dictate any of those things. But what they expect is they expect integrity in the product that you're selling them. And nowadays, whether it's ideological or whether it's, I don't know, economic, what we are getting more often than not is something that is inauthentic. And we can smell it. Something that, here, we're not going to tell you a great story. Remember, my axiom is never put your agenda, never put your universe, never put your economic considerations before character and story. If you're going to allow your identity politics to define what story you're going to tell, you have lost, and you're betraying your audience. If you're going to tell a story, the first thing you have to do is be true to your characters and your story. Your story should already have whatever elements you'd like to get across to the audience baked into the concept. The Snyder Cut of Justice League represents a return, whether you like it or not, whether you appreciate Zack Snyder's vision or not. The reason why the Snyder Cut is important is because ultimately it is a victory of integrity and intent over, well, people making wrong decisions, people destroying something. And I think when I read Gail Simone's tweets, her string of tweets, I was like, fuck yeah, Gail Simone, you understand why I like Zack Snyder's vision of these characters. You understand it. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but like Gail Simone pointed out, it's a different vibe. And when she tells me that when she watches Zack Snyder's Justice League, the fact that the feeling that film evoked in her, yes, with the slow motion, and yes, with the languid takes or whatever of water crashing over Aquaman, which I'm so fucking there for. Because like I said, man, it's fucking metal. It's like a fucking Frazetta album cover. Molly Hatchet, you know, with the death dealer on the horse. That's what you want, man. And she gets it. When I read Gail Simone, I'm like, Gail Simone knows it's metal. I bet if I asked her, I said, Gail, was it shit metal? She would have said, yes, Rob, this was fucking metal. And it made me feel like I felt when I was a little kid. Because I knew back then that watching Superman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and John Jones and fucking Batman, who's metal too, even though he has no superheroes or powers. That's what you want. That's what you want. And that's what the Snyder Cut's going to give us. By God. The integrity has been restored. This is why it's important. It is a victory for art. It's a victory for commerce. It's a victory for Jason Killar. I can't wait. Fuck yeah. Bring it on. Woohoo. Anyway, that's all fans want. Fandom is just looking for integrity in the things that they are going to shell out money for, the things that they are going to wait to see, that they're going to dream about. You know, one of the things I love about Hot Toys is I might have to wait a year and a half to get one. But when I get a fucking Hot Toy, and I open that shit up, I look in the box, you know, like, this doesn't even have everything that came in the box, but it's got this blue light, the head sculpt. I mean, I look at this. Where do you see this under blue light or black light? I mean, I look at this and I'm like, even the stand, you can't really see it, but it's etched. The reason that I love Hot Toys figures is because they have integrity. The product is so good. I'm not saying it's perfect. Watch Justin's collection. He'll tell you what's great and what's not. He's not some sycophant that says, well, you know, these are great no matter what. No, he's highly critical. You can be highly critical of things. But wouldn't you rather be highly critical of things that have integrity? And I know it's hard. It's hard for us as fans. I mean, it's so interesting to me because the studios complain and bitch and moan when we as fans, look, we need to be nicer. And we need to be more, but we need to be nicer to each other everywhere, always, across the planet. You know, let's not have genocide. Isn't it better to not have genocide? Why don't we sit down and have a meal? I don't know if we're ever going to get there because we hate each other, and I understand that. But life would be better if we didn't, if we were a little bit more tolerant. Anyway, I just think that the Snyder Cut, ultimately, for me, it represents a triumph of storytelling integrity and at least restoring. Because why am I buying movies? Why am I buying action figures? Why am I buying? Because they come from things that I believe have storytelling integrity. And even though you spend $200 million on something, it doesn't mean it can't have storytelling integrity. You know, I used to look at all the great movies that studios made. I love motion picture studios. I don't want to bag on studios. I've loved studio product my whole life. All my favorite movies came from studios. There's a lot of independent stuff too, but pick it. Godfather, made by Paramount. Paramount developed the book that it came from, and the movie. Paramount. I mean, of course, they gave Francis Coppola shit every day he made the first Godfather. They want him to fire Al Pacino. I mean, what's so interesting about The Godfather is there was a guy that was embattled. Coppola was embattled the whole time, and the studio didn't want to do anything he wanted to do. But he kept at it. He beat him. He won all the way to the Academy Awards. And same thing. And I think that, in a way, that's what Zack Snyder's done with this. That's what the fans did. The fans demanded just restore what was supposed to be given to us in the first place, which really isn't asking for much, which is sort of ironic. I mean, it'd be interesting to see. Now, hey, proof is here. Will it drive? Will it ultimately prove to be a moneymaker for HBO Max? Will it drive subscriptions? It may not. It may not. And if that's the case, then we let down the studio, or we let down HBO Max. Let's just hope. Let's hope it's a win. Because if it's not a win, well then, moving forward, artistic integrity will lose, and corporate interests will win. Because at the end of the day, a movie is just a product. So hopefully everyone's going to buy it, and it'll be a great big success. Anyway, that's all I want to say today about that. Kind of didn't go as well as or maybe it didn't go as well. No, it went differently than I thought. So there you go. Now, I got a letter, actually 2 letters, from our man Claudius, one half of the official couple of this channel. I love Claude. Claude works for our government, doing clandestine things. He has a lovely wife, Candida, and they have a son, Spencer. So he is part of a modern, loving American family. But apparently, Claude has a secret Gollum and Schmeagol in his life, because I received not 1, but 2 letters from Claude, and I wanted to share them both. Because 1, I don't quite know what it all means, but I thought you'd get a kick out of it, you imagination connoisseurs. I'm going to read one right after the other, and you tell me which one's which. Rob, my old friend, to the last I grapple with thee. I, Claudius, angry alter ego Claudius Maximus, is writing to you because I'm seething with rage. Why? To be honest, everything. That's Steve Inskeep on NPR, Nancy Pelosi radio, that just makes my blood boil every day. But today, Rob, I read that the woke liberal Twitterati, the Librazis, and the progressive cult managed to cancel the Miss Germany pageant. Rob, I'm so angry. The Miss Germany pageant. You know what's next, right? That's right, Miss America. Now, to be honest, the Miss Germany pageant wasn't actually canceled, but it might as well have been, because those weak-minded judges had the nerve to crown a 33-year-old mother of 2 Miss Germany, and she dared to accept the award in a pantsuit. A pantsuit! Ugh, damn it, Rob, I'm enraged. And I'm not entitled to see her in a skin... Oh, and am I not entitled to see her in a skin-tight sequined evening gown? To Dieter, what the fuck is platform for female empowerment? You mean to tell me women win the beauty contest because they have an amazing personality and vision? Ugh. Rob, why are the people on your side doing this? They're destroying Western culture. They also canceled the swimsuit portion of the event because women parading around in swimsuits for our amusement is degrading. Frack! If I want to see an intelligent woman parade around in a pantsuit, I'll go to work. Beauty pageants are supposed to allow married men to oogle hot women from the comfort of our living rooms. What's next? Is Penthouse going to feature a spread of responsibly dressed women fully clothed in flannel and Birkenstocks? I'll bet the only nudity we'll see on OnlyFans are men chained on leashes, bent over on their knees, serving as gimps to their progressive female overlords. Rob, I'm not going to even talk about the hordes of Twitterazzi storming over Stuyber Steps and Sokovia to get Elizabeth Olsen for using the G word for Romani peoples on an old episode of The Graham Norton Show. Rob, trust me, I thoroughly researched this story on Facebook. The actress mistakenly used the word twice, and now they want to cancel the most awesome actress in the MCU. Who are they, Rob? Don't play with me. You know it's the tweeters. Despite your fake outrage, I know you really want to protect your lib family. Do theirs have a secret password like Kamala Harris's middle name, Devi? They type Devi and your website says, Yas, Queen, enter. That's how you get to the Robservations champagne room party. But instead of Cristal champagne and naked female strippers, you sit around eating hummus and goat cheese while trying to out-woke each other. This is the threat we're under, Rob. I don't want organically grown progressive pop culture concocted in someone's overpriced Brooklyn bathtub. In my Starfleet, all of the hot women will wear mini skirts. Okay, do you want me to prove this threat? Case in point, Burnett, I can't buy Dr. Seuss or Nazi memorabilia on eBay anymore. See, censorship. Wait a second, my lawyers are saying that the government is actually not limiting my right to talk about it. They're also saying that private businesses like Amazon, eBay, and Dr. Seuss Estates can choose not to carry or promote any product they choose. Oh, U.S. law on Facebook already forbids underage pornography, so we've already agreed to place limits on what we think is decent. Okay, so it's not Nazi-style censorship. Look, Rob, forget the lawyers. I'm no constitutional scholar. I'm a man scared of a world in which I can't buy racist iconography or watch scantily clad women on network TV. What is wrong with the world? You and I both know that the jackbooted think-speak mob came after you, J.K. Rowling, then Grease. Sweet Christmas, Olivia Newton-John, then Dr. Seuss, and now they're after Pepe Le Pew. That skunk taught me how to treat a woman, Rob. I can prove to you how large a threat this is. I don't need a Pew Research survey to substantiate this. I screen captured a bunch of tweets about it, so that clearly proves that there must be millions of people who think this is important. Boom! Your move, Burnett. Signed, Claudius, alter ego, a.k.a. Claudius Maximus. So that was the first letter I got from, well, apparently, I don't know if that was the Gollum or Smeagol. You decide. But here's the other letter that came in right after this one. Bonsoir, Robert. Hello, Post-Geek Singularity. Before you read this letter, let me first state that I have enjoyed Robservations, Elizaviews, and the Post-Geek Singularity. I, however, feel compelled to address the controversy surrounding cancel culture and outrage. Cancel culture and outrage. A frequent topic on this show is wokeness. It's the idea that the liberal intelligentsia and its adherents want to cancel any offensive references and personalities from popular culture. The liberal intelligentsia is described as a cultural mindthink which demands uniformity. Personally, I recognize that there are some on the left who demand ideological purity. They seem to lack patience and/or acceptance of those who are generally supportive of liberal causes but do not agree with all of their positions. Professional discrimination can be addressed as a matter of organizational policy, but true tolerance and acceptance cannot be demanded or legislated. I think the mantra of defund the police was a philosophical and tactical error that undercut the Black Lives Matter protests during the 2020 protests. Some would have labeled me a conservative sellout for that opinion. I think that we all need to stop using clumsy labels like black and white, because it betrays a degree of ignorance. There are socioeconomically depressed peoples of many ethnic backgrounds. Even though 27% of African Americans live in poverty, the majority of poor by sheer numbers are actually of European descent. I think public policy should help everyone, regardless of their ethnic background. On the other side of the political divide are conservative pundits like Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro, who seem to exist in a state of perpetual outrage over cancel culture. Tucker questions the existence of institutionalized racism. This is the kind of racism prevalent in popular culture that influences art, business, home loans, and employment. This kind of racism is hard to quantify. So Tucker deftly provides a narrow definition of racism as something violent, the domain of violent extremist groups, like the Klan and neo-Nazis. He ignores historical inequities and focuses on culture warfare while playing the victimhood card. The message of cancel culture is more of a threat to Western civilization than the actual storming of the Capitol building just 2 months ago. Let's ignore the fact that a sitting president denied certified election results and millions of Americans believed in the QAnon conspiracy. In my opinion, this should be more alarming and noteworthy than some random individuals criticizing Greece or Pepe Le Pew. Author Philip Nell wrote in the book, Was the Cat in the Hat Black? Asking a question. Was the Cat in the Hat influenced by black culture? He explored the ethnocentrism in Seuss's work. That book was not as widely read as Tucker Carlson's nightly broadcasts, but the Dr. Seuss estate determined that 6 books in its catalog contained problematic depictions of historically marginalized ethnicities and decided to pull these books from circulation. They already knew that these depictions were problematic because they'd removed the yellow coloring from the Asian character in previous printings. Is this censorship? No, because a private company decided to pull it for market reasons. Rob, you have argued against removing offensive things from pop culture. My counter-argument is that this line of reasoning is not consistent with history or the market. Manufacturers constantly tinker with consumer products because they are consumer products designed to sell. If they do not sell, they are redesigned, remarketed, or discontinued. What is the difference with changing the features on a hot toy character so that it is more attractive to consumers? The song Part of Your World was nearly cut from The Little Mermaid because the children in focus groups were getting antsy. Are we confusing nostalgia for consumer products with history? It has been said, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. So, for example, if I never watch Song of the South, what's going to happen? The Song of the South is not history. In fact, if you want to understand the Reconstruction era, I recommend W.E. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction in America, 1860 to 1880. That book is the result of research. In contrast, A Song of the South is a piece of fiction designed for the consumer market. I'm sorry to say, Rob, that A Song of the South is designed with arguably the same degree of agenda-driven politics that we find in Star Trek Discovery and Picard. In my opinion, it's all fiction, designed by a studio, and it may border on propaganda. Hollywood has been in the business of propaganda for over 100 years. As we've discussed before, the Hays Code prevented the depiction of many real-world phenomena, including recreational drugs and interracial relationships. The Hays Code was agenda-driven and leaves a distorted cultural legacy. You've argued that the inexorable progress of society has moved us past the Hays Code. I disagree. I think there's an unofficial cultural code that is constantly in flux. Maybe it's influenced by studio heads, market researchers, and test screenings. In 1990, Disney decided against Pretty Woman's original title, 3000, which was the cost of the prostitute, because they wanted to downplay the darker aspects of the story. That's true, by the way. Respectfully, Rob, it is your show, your house, and your rules. We are guests at your party. So let me ask a different question. Is this the kind of discussion that the PGS is qualified to discuss? One of your frequent refrains has been, all people are not made equally. I agree. And all statements and opinions are not the same. Some opinions are more informed by research than others. Some ideas are better thought out. The Post-Geek singularity is comprised of smart and really talented people. But discussing politics, race, and gender requires more than just an opinion. It should be informed by research. In closing, let me review a few points. There is a big difference between censorship and promotion. Censorship directs the suppression of thoughts, ideas, and art based on content. However, if private companies decide to discontinue a product, that is called business. When a fan or business evangelizes a product, that's promotion. Mein Kampf is available, but does not require promotion. Dr. Seuss's books and most Hollywood movies are products. They become historical artifacts, but they are not of themselves historical records. Historical artifacts deserve a place in museums, not on store shelves. eBay doesn't facilitate the trade of Nazi memorabilia because they aren't in the business of promoting Nazi iconography. Remember, the government does censor with the consent of the majority. We the people prohibit the creation, trade, and distribution of child pornography as well as the proliferation of nuclear technology. So censorship already exists at some level. I hope all of us agree with this censorship. In my opinion, having an opinion does not necessitate sharing that opinion. I think opinion should be informed by research, context, and should also, hopefully, be constructive. When opinions are shaped by frustration, hate, and fear, they tend to be counter-constructive. For example, if a reviewer or filmmaker is tired of watching superhero movies, do not review or comment on superhero movies. Ignore it, like a product on the shelf. If you do not want to drink beer, do not drink beer. Keep walking down the aisle and then drink what you want. Then promote the hell out of the things that you love. As many before have said, focusing on our positive shared interests is what separates the Post-Geek singularity from many other communities. Rob, thanks for reading my letter. Claudius. Well, there you go. 2 very different letters from the same man. I don't quite know what to make of it, but I enjoyed reading them, and I want to thank Claudius for sending them in. What do you think? What does everybody think? And look, I did try and give it an extra little bit of oomph in my delivery, but seeing as, I didn't practice or rehearse, I hope I did an okay job for all of you bringing those letters to life. I want to thank Claude for being so thoughtful in writing both letters in, and I think I learned something. I don't necessarily know if you all did. I think you might have, but what did you think? That's what I'm interested in. What did you think? Here's a letter from Mario Lopez. Not the Mario Lopez, the other one. Hi, Robert. Here I am again, Mario Lopez from Portugal. I accepted your challenge. I saw 2 of the films you recommended. Ooh. All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard. This is the second viewer that watched Sunset Boulevard and wrote in. I love this. I'll start with Sunset Boulevard. At first, it was difficult to see the film, but it improved from the moment Norma went to Cecil B. DeMille. This was the scene that I liked the most, not only because it was DeMille as himself, but I also liked to see the way she was recognized and treated with respect by all the people who still remembered her. I enjoyed more seeing All About Eve, especially the actress's representation, and it was a pleasant surprise to see Marilyn Monroe. There was only one thing I didn't like about both films. Why do they start with a scene near the end of the film and then start the film from the beginning? Doing so in Sunset Boulevard was particularly bad to me. Why did they make a big spoil of how the movie was going to end? And why was it narrated by a dead man? Rob, one question. Do you know why this method is used so often? I don't know anyone who likes to see films in which they show how the story ends right at the beginning. Although I didn't love watching these films, I liked the experience. I don't think I saw a film from the 50s in over 20 years. This experience reminded me of the times when I watched older films with my father. He was very fond of these movies, so much so that he even got many autographed copies and photographs of Hollywood actors over the years. Unfortunately, I can no longer repeat this experience with him, but I will try and review the following films with my mother. Gone with the Wind, It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and my dad's favorite, McKenna's Gold. I leave this message with a small request. Could you see or talk about a movie that few people know, but that if it had the name Tarantino, it would be known worldwide? I'm talking about The Way of the Gun by Christopher McQuarrie, screenwriter from The Usual Suspects, with Ryan Phillippe, Benicio del Toro, Juliette Lewis, and James Caan. In my opinion, Ryan Phillippe and Benicio del Toro make the best bandit duo I've ever seen. Rob, have you seen this movie? What do you think of it? Do you know why it's so unknown or so little talked about? P.S. Attached together a frame that my father made with these photographs that he received despite being in Portugal. Let's see. This is very nice. This is all the way from Portugal. This is what Mario Lopez's dad made. This is really cool. Okay, let me put this in the chat. Put it up so you can see it. And this is what Mario Lopez's dad made in Portugal. His favorite film stars. This is really neat. Look at this. Check that out. Autographs of some of Hollywood's finest. And there you go, Mario. Thank you for that. What an interesting letter you have written in. Thank you very much for that. First of all, I want to thank you for watching both All About Eve and Sunset Boulevard. You know, you pointed something out to me. It never occurred to me when I was saying recommending those films. You're right. They both start at the end of the story. And I think what I find interesting about that, you don't so much know it's the end of the story. Well, I guess you do. But to me, the end of the story is not what's the most important. It's the journey of that story and how you get to the end of the story that's most important. Sure, Sunset Boulevard is a little bit more graphic in that the main character of Sunset Boulevard isn't, and yet he's narrating his own story. And then we go back in time and see what happens. And in All About Eve, it opens at an awards ceremony where Eve Harrington, the titular Eve, is being celebrated, and we go back in time. I guess she didn't like either movie. I love those two films. They're two of my favorite movies. I mean, Sunset Boulevard to me is one of the great noir films of all time, and All About Eve is one of the great movies about show business, even though both are really about show business. And I see them both as cautionary tales. All About Eve, I think, ends on an uplifting note. Sunset Boulevard, not so much. It's one of the more tragic and creepy endings. But I'm sorry I didn't love those movies. Those movies they're dark. They deal with dark subject matter, and they are dark films. They're not just film noir, but they truly are dealing with the darkness of the human soul. And maybe that's not why you liked them. I adore both films, but I want to thank you for watching them both. And I really liked that you wrote in and told me about what you thought. So thank you very much for that. This comes from Keith O'Neill. Hey, Rob, with the Snyder Cut of Justice League upon us this week, throw up the Ronnie James Dio certified devil horns. Do you think it will set a new precedent with studios releasing alternate cuts of movies? Sure, when DVDs were at their peak, they'd slap a director's cut or unrated cut label on practically every other movie to boost up sales, even if it was just one new scene added or some alternate take here and there. I know Blade Runner has more cuts and varieties than a steakhouse. Uh-oh, he's doing jokes, people. That's written in there, by the way. But that and Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, are the only movies, along with what I've heard of the Snyder Cut, at least that I can think of, where the original cut of the movie was drastically different from what was originally released. Your thoughts? Thanks, Keith. P.S. Saw the video on the passing of Stephen Mark Chure. Very touching. May he rest in peace. Yes, that's why I did incorporate in my little artwork in the beginning, I did incorporate this, my Evangelist of the Imagination drawing. This is by Stephen Chure, and what was interesting is his one of our viewers went to his funeral, and Stephen Chure's sisters apparently found this drawing and didn't know who I was. Come on, man. No, I'm just kidding. But didn't know who I was, and the viewer told them. And they contacted me via Twitter and sent me this picture. So I couldn't help but be touched by that. So I've incorporated that into the beginning of the show as a tribute to, it's not like everybody, obviously Claudius he's part of the official first couple of this family. Mark Chure was our official Toxic fan. Kaz Graphics is our official cheesemonger. Julius Goodwin is our official sommelier. So we've lost one of the official members of this group, so I figure it's my way to incorporate him eternally into the Post-Geek singularity. So thank you for that. Much appreciated. But what a great letter. So thanks for writing in. But in terms of director's cuts, Keith, that's a really good question. There are movies like Once Upon a Time in America that were butchered by the studio. And I think for the most part, if you talk to a lot of filmmakers, the movies that get released are their director's cuts. Ridley Scott, a lot of his films, I think back to Kingdom of Heaven, for instance, his director's cut is radically different from what was released. It's much longer. It's a much better version of the film. But Ridley Scott's somebody who's tried to appease the studios. Legend. Ridley Scott's Legend also has two very different versions. The European version with the Jerry Goldsmith score is, I think it's 2 hours. The American version is just a little over 90 minutes and has a Tangerine Dream score. Very different kinds of movies. And obviously there's other, Clive Barker's version of Nightbreed is pretty different. There's movies that are really hacked to shreds because the studio wants to cut them down for time, and they're deeply compromised. And there's a few out there that but the ones that jump to mind the most, like Kingdom of Heaven and Once Upon a Time in America, are pretty different. but for the most part, I think most films don't have that kind of drastic. There hasn't been that kind of drastic change. But there are some. I mean, there are versions of Heaven's Gate. Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate has a much longer version. These are just things off the top of my head, but I don't think it's going to be the norm. I think for the most part, most filmmakers get to release the best versions of their movies. I think it's very unique, and what happened with Zack Snyder is particularly unique. So, yeah, different thing. This one comes from DC. Greetings, Rob, in the Post-Geek Singularity. It's me again, DC, the Count of Geekery from the lockdown wasteland of England. Hope you're staying safe and well. Rob, I have a rant today, considering the second part of my rant letter trilogy. The first part being about Star Trek a few weeks back. But today, I'd like to talk about the DCEU. The DCEU is a fascinating and great idea, for obvious reasons, but also seeing as the MCU had started the trend of having an acknowledged cinematic shared superhero universe with an overarching story which also allowed for each character to have their own series and movies with their own character, arc, and their own standalone story. That is only connected through hints and subtle nods to the bigger picture and post-credit scenes. It allowed for audiences to become fully invested in the bigger story at play, or to be able to only watch a trilogy of movies based on one character if they wished to do that. So naturally, Marvel's biggest rival, DC Comics, would want to start their own cinematic universe. This was a concept I actually had high hopes for. I've always been more of a DC Comics fan than a Marvel fan. I only ever read Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, X-Men, and the Eternals from Marvel as a kid and teenager, but Batman, and by extension DC Comics, have held my attention since age 6, when I first saw Michael Keaton running around in the Batsuit in Tim Burton's Batman. Also, DC Comics had a darker, grittier feel to them. The DC Universe was epic in scope and had an awesome mythology on top of that epic scope. The DC comic book universe is a multi-layered cake of storytelling. As a reader of DC Comics, you always get the feeling that it's a dangerous universe for the characters to be in. And a movie version of this universe, with the complex and overarching storylines the comics had pulled off over the decades, was enough to get my geek radar going off the charts. It offered a nice alternative to the MCU movies, which had become very cookie-cutter, play-safe, bright, colorful, and cheery. Are they, though? Are they bright and cheery? Are they? That's a terrible snap. Maybe I'm getting old. Along with bloodless violence on the tamer side of things, as well as an overwhelming sense that the good guys would always win in the end, the MCU never really felt like Iron Man, Thor, Spider-Man, or Captain America were really in any danger from death or injury. Yeah, that was the whole thing in Phase 2, where several characters lost an arm or a hand, and of course in Infinity War and Endgame, we finally got the sense of danger to the heroes, as Thanos presented a genuine threat to them, whereas none of the villains leading up to those last Avengers movies did, at least in my opinion. There was also way too much comedy in the MCU, which made it come across cheesy and camp at times. It was quite jarring in some films, Ant-Man, Thor Ragnarok, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Black Panther, to name a few examples. So a DC Comics movie universe done in a similar way to the MCU is a dream come true for me as a DC Comics fan. When Man of Steel finally dropped, I was both pleased and confused by the film. I love that Zack Snyder movies are often dark in color palette, and dark and gritty in time and theme, and considering how well his Watchmen movie turned out, yes, I'm one of those weird people who love that movie, love me or hate me, I care not. I couldn't help but think that Snyder was the perfect man for the job, but his darker and more brooding interpretation of Superman was rather off-putting. Superman is a symbol of hope and optimism, a shining beacon for all those who lose heart, letting them know that no matter how dark things are, brighter times will come. The darker version we got in Man of Steel just didn't sit well with me, or fit with character, really. I think Critical Drinker summed it up best about Snyder's version of Kal-El, and I quote, "Seeing him deconstructed like this is like seeing Mr. Rogers at an S&M party." God damn, I love The Drinker. Henry Cavill was perfect for the role, however. He just had the wrong interpretation of the character to work with. Cavill's performance was the only thing that made the movie bearable. Kal-El killing Zod was a big bone of contention for many. It was actually the one change to the character of Superman that I liked from Zack Snyder. It dared to be different. It showed us, the audience, that even Superman is not immune to anger and giving into the darker side of nature. It was also a neat little bit of foreshadowing for what Zack Snyder had planned in the future, What with his plans for Superman to go rogue and cause the post-apocalyptic Earth we see in Bruce Wayne's nightmare sequence in Batman v Superman, that would also be a part of the Justice League trilogy. I honestly feel that Superman was the wrong starting point to kick off the darker and more serious movie franchise. Honestly, Snyder should have kicked it off with Batman. That's low-hanging fruit, I know, but Batman, their darkest comic book character, aside from Swamp Thing and the characters in Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics and a handful of others I've left out, it really should have been a no-brainer for the DCEU starting point. Batman v Superman was another misstep when it came to the DCEU. It was a movie that tried to force the work of an entire Marvel phase into one movie. I don't disagree with that, causing it to be bloated and drawn out when it should have been more streamlined, action-packed, and a thrill ride with lots of fights, big-ass set pieces, and a story arc both for the main characters to go through. It inserted Wonder Woman into a story in which she felt somewhat out of place, when she should have got her own movie to introduce her and set her up first. Don't get me wrong, her turning point at the end of the final battle was great, and they could have had a few scenes of her throughout the movie leading up to that point, but the whole Bruce Wayne thing bloated the film. The movie also spent a good chunk of the story setting up Aquaman, the Flash, and Cyborg in a subplot that was not needed in this movie. Again, those three characters should have had their own origin movies to set them up. And of course, it had the battle between the two biggest players in the Justice League take place when it wasn't the right time for it. The conflict between Batman and Superman should have been carefully built up over several preceding movies, not Man of Steel and then straight into Batman v Superman. Wonder Woman came along too late in the DCEU slate. Suicide Squad was a movie that should have been used to kick off another franchise that was connected to the DCEU. It should have been the first movie in the villain universe where stories were told from the villain's perspective, while also allowing these same villains to cross over into the main DCEU movies. Birds of Prey should also have been a villain in this villain universe. Aquaman came along too late in the game. It did better than any of the previous DCEU movies at the box office, but it still doesn't mean it came along too late. And Shazam came along too early. Then, of course, we all know how the theatrical cut of Justice League turned out because Joss Whedon and studio interference. The studio executives wanting Justice League to be more lighter and emotional and thematic tone as well as being more comedic. Essentially, they wanted a DCEU film that was in the Marvel mold, and, well, it just didn't work. All of these things led to a cinematic universe failing before it even got going. Most of this was, of course, down to studio mismanagement and starting the show with a Superman movie, but the biggest mistake in all of this is that there's not a Kevin Feige-like figure making sure everything goes on the right course. And this all pisses me off, Rob, because it can't be that hard to know that DC Comics material is not going to fit into the Marvel mold. It's not rocket science to figure out that Batman is the best starting point. He's one of the most recognizable comic book characters on the planet, even to a general audience of moviegoers. Plus, he's a favorite of many millions of people. Not too long ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, a survey was done here in the UK to find out who the UK's favorite superhero and supervillain was. The number one spot for hero went to Batman, and the number one spot for villain went to the Joker. I know this might not be the case in the US, but Batman is undoubtedly a top 3 favorite over there across the pond and around the globe. It also cannot be that hard to find a Kevin Feige for the DC superhero universe movies. Actually, it is. I don't have much filmmaking experience aside from the 3 short films I've made in my early teens and the 5 feature-length screenplays I've written. I don't think I've mentioned that before, but I may have, but I don't recall. But I could do a better job at being a DC Comics Kevin Feige than Walter Hamada or anyone at Warner Brothers. Rant over. As a little bit of fun and as an experiment, below I have listed the order in which the DCEU movies would have been made and released if I were given the chance to helm the project in a Kevin Feige role. You don't have to read this part on air if you don't want to, Rob. Oh, I do. I decided to include it, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether or not what I've proposed here could work. I'd also love to hear the thoughts of the Post-Geek Singularity in the chat. For simplicity's sake, I've called this the Motherbox Saga, and instead of phrases, each set of movies forms a book. Bear in mind that there will be hints in each movie that connects it to a larger story at play and have cameo appearances from other major characters as opposed to post-credit scenes. And all first solo movies serve as origin movies, with the exception of Batman, to set them up and introduce them to audiences. Included is some very brief plot points. The movies cover 2 sets of movies building up to the Justice League one. So here is DC from the UK. Here is what he would see as what he calls the Motherbox Saga. Book 1, The first movie should have been Batman, a generic Batman movie with an older Batman and Clark Kent cameo. Movie 2 would be Wonder Woman, basically the same as the first film we got, as nothing major needs to be changed. Number 3, Man of Steel, a less dark and broody Superman, but other than this change, the film mostly remains the same, with a Diana Prince cameo at the end. Number 4, Batman 2, in which Batman begins to investigate Superman and Luthor, and first crosses paths with Diana Prince. Number 5 would be Man of Steel 2. A new threat appears in Gotham, and Superman believes that Batman won't win this fight, as he's only human. So Superman goes to Gotham, destruction and carnage ensues, and during all of this, Bruce Wayne's hate for Superman begins. Number 6, Batman v Superman. Basically the same film that we ended up with, except without the subplot setting up the other members of the Justice League. Book 2 would be Aquaman, origin story with a cameo from Bruce Wayne. Number 2 would be The Flash, origin story, and we find out why his dad's in prison, a cameo from Bruce Wayne. Number 3 would be Cyborg, an origin story picking up from his bit part in Superman 2. Number 4 would be Batman 3, starts as a generic Batman movie and ends up being about Bruce Wayne tracking down Aquaman and the Flash. Number 5 would be Wonder Woman 2. While Bruce Wayne is looking for Aquaman and the Flash, Wonder Woman takes up the mantle of Earth's protector. Number 6 would be Martian Manhunter. It's an origin story. He fights with the Justice League. Number 7 would be Man of Steel 3. Recently returned from the dead, Superman behaves as he does when he is newly revived in Justice League, but eventually comes to his senses as he begins to remember things. And number 8 is Justice League 1. So there it is, Rob, and the Post-Geek Singularity. That's how I think Warner Brothers and Zack Snyder should have started the DCEU, at least in terms of the movies made, and it should have been released in that order. But ultimately, this is how I would start the DCEU if I was given the opportunity to helmet a Kevin Feige position. Sorry for this being another long letter, Rob. I'll make my next letter shorter, and I'll leave a longer wait time before sending another one in so others can write in. One more thing, I have 2 songs to recommend for the 666 Robservations playlist. Number 1 is The Devil is a Loser by Lordi, and the second is not really about the devil, but it's appropriate as the band's singer sounds like what I imagine Satan sounds like when he sings. This song is Immortal by Lorna Shore. A quick warning, though, don't play this one within hearing distance of children or the elderly, as it will traumatize them. Laugh out loud. Have a good one, Rob. May the Force be with you always. Well, thanks for that, DC. I appreciate that. Wild. This has been a wild chat. So let's see. Right now, we got Claudius. Now let's see who's over here. Claudius. He's where are we at? Let's see where we're at. What are you guys saying? We're gonna find out right now. Dakota sends in a tip, and Dakota says, in the 90s, there was a short-lived X-Men spin-off of the half comic called Generation X. It consisted of Jubilee, the White Queen, and Banshee, among other new characters at the time. Do you remember the made-for-TV movie Generation X that aired on Fox? It only aired one time. I remember I was so hyped for it at the time, for Jubilee was my favorite X-Men character. For a made-for-TV movie, it wasn't that bad. You know what? I did see it, and I don't remember much about it. That Generation X comic, though, I have the number 1 issue foil printed. I like Generation X as a comic, but I just don't remember much about the show. Sentient Dildo. Greetings, Rob. It's me again. Your favorite and only Sentient Dildo, I hope. I was being used in an orgy yesterday, and I've never felt more violated in my life. Laugh out loud. By the way, have you ever used a dildo on yourself or someone else? Thanks, and be well, my friend. Well, Sentient Dildo, in answer to your question, yes. Yes, I have. Yes to both of those questions. Jeff Yerke and Mrs. Y sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. Greetings from sunny Northern California, where Mrs. Y and I just received our second Moderna shot with no side effects. Well, congratulations. That's awesome. We finally finished WandaVision and have to say we will not be returning to that show again. Uh-oh. Be seeing you, the Yerk Man. Well, I'm sorry you didn't like it, but you got Falcon and Winter Soldier, which looks pretty damn good. I can't wait to hear what you guys say about that. Which is amazing. Simon sends in a tip and says, so with all the excitement over Justice League, the question is, will we all actually be able to see it on the 18th? I'm worried that by the time we get to see it on the 18th, that the bandwidth will be so overloaded that a lot of us with HBO Max subs will miss it. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think so because it starts at night. I don't know how many people are going to watch it at 11 p.m. like I am for 4 hours. They might dip into it, but we shall see. I hope not, because I want to watch it, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to be here at 3:00 in the morning, giving you my just finished review. Raymond Verrata sends in a super chat and says, if you've seen the Snyder Cut, when is the best time to go to the restroom? I haven't seen this. I remember asking this on for Endgame on John's show. Well, the great thing about the Snyder Cut is you just have to click. It's broken into apparently 6 parts. Just break it out of chapter. It literally has chapter headings. So I would break it there. I break it at a chapter heading. Alex Sarah says, I confess, Robert, to being morbidly curious about the Snyder Cut, but as time went on, I've become more and more excited. Well, see, I've been excited too. And it looks, look, like I said, it just looks so much fun, and I'm a Snyder fan, so I can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see it. Black Philip Alvarez sends in a tip and says, do you think we would have gotten a Snyder Cut even without the fan demand? No way. No way. I think that the Snyder Cut exists because fandom spoke out, and it was something that was constantly being babbled about for years. And I'll tell you, look, going online and going after people, screaming and yelling at them on social media or denouncing them never works. But the Snyder Cut shows that when you have an organized group of fans that put their energy into positive things like raising money for suicide prevention and comporting themselves in a planned, methodical manner, you can affect real change. You can affect real change. And I think that the result of that is the Snyder Cut. Now, we can't control it, but ultimately they're hoping this is going to drive subscriptions and make HBO Max money. If it doesn't, it won't happen again. If it does, well, then maybe more things like this can happen. It really comes down to they will. I don't know what their numbers are, but will they show an uptick in subscribers or not? I don't know the answer to that, but if they do, well, there's the answer. So everybody, it's really going to come down to, I hope everybody who ever wanted the Snyder Cut subscribes to HBO Max and watches it. And you know what? If you are a real fan of Zack Snyder's and you're a real fan of the Snyder Cut, it means something to you, you won't torrent it. You'll pay for it. Because that is ultimately the only thing that HBO Max is going to understand. And I would like to see it become a rousing success. I am an HBO Max subscriber. One of the reasons I subscribed was because of their entire 2021 slate being released theatrically. Theaters haven't been open in LA until yesterday. A few were open, not all of them, but yeah. You got to go pay for HBO Max. Cancel it later, but pay for it. Support, if the Snyder Cut more than anything needs you to support it with your dollar. Yeah, more than anything. Sheriff Carl says, dude, 1983 was great. The sheriff came to Seatown. Channel 11 ruled, and the word toxic is now nausea-inducing, making it literally toxic. I think in the real world, most of us can get along. On the internet, people turn either impolite or holier than thou. Or both. No, but you're right. I agree with you. 1983, I thought good. The Hunger came out in 1983. 1983 wasn't all bad. I have no problem with 83. I certainly love the early 80s. I had a great time. Another person's shoes, one of 3, says, I'll just read these all together. We have to admit that there is indeed a faction of fandom that doesn't like diversity or inclusion. I understand that you've never had a negative experience or were excluded from fandom at a convention. That's great. But for a non-white fan, it can be different. Let's face it. There are places, Geeks and Gamers for instance, that simply hate a property because it's inclusive. Woke is the new buzzword of the bigoted. It gets tossed out by people who don't even know the origin or meaning of the word. And let me go to your third one. Try and listen without anger to how these fans feel. You don't have to agree. Just listen and acknowledge that their experience may be different because of who they are and how they're treated. That's all. It's not 1964 anymore. Open your minds. Another person choose, totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. But I ultimately think, I honestly don't necessarily think that there are people like for instance, I've streamed a lot over the last 6 months with Az, heel versus babyface, and people have told me these things about Az, that he is racist or something like that, and I'm like, I don't get that from him at all. And we've had long conversations. It's just, I think like anything else, we live in a time where I think this agenda-based storytelling, virtue signaling, identity politics, all of that that's permeated our culture. And I see all of this as something that has derailed the actual evolution that was naturally occurring. People have stepped in and they want everything to happen now. They want the world to be changed now. And I think people have taken it upon themselves. Part of the reason this culture exists is everyone's become so goddamn self-righteous all of a sudden, because it gives them a feeling of, look, I understand. Everybody wants to feel important, or they want to feel they've done something satisfying. And there's nothing more satisfying than to step in and help your fellow mankind. Fellow people. How about that, before I get yelled at? And there's nothing, I completely agree. But we were doing socially, our society was evolving. It was evolving, and suddenly all of this, look, if you're suddenly part of a group, you cannot trade one oppression for another. And I see that happening all over the place, that we're trading one oppression for another. That's not going to work. And I think that in a desire to be helpful and in a desire to have a more just and verdant society or whatever, we've gone overboard to the extent that suddenly people want to be punished for we're going to go after people that you're part of the same group of people that existed 150 years ago, so we're going to punish you for the past crimes of your civilization. I mean, it's a strange thing. But look, I agree with you to the extent that we have to be, we just have to, look, Tango Shalom. One of the characters in Tango Shalom says, I believe in being kind to one another. And I believe that too. I mean, that should be a baseline. However, it is very difficult when we are, as consumers, are being fed stories that feel inauthentic because the agendas of these stories are being pushed and they compromise the integrity of the stories themselves. I mean, what's so interesting to me is if you look at the original Star Trek and you look at the original Twilight Zone, which were foundational cornerstone entertainments of my childhood, they were, I would call them, incredibly progressive, let's call them woke, if you want to call it that. I mean, the Twilight Zone dealt with a lot of these issues head on, but of course it was in the context of a fantasy series, but dealt with this. So did Star Trek. And yet, it still felt like the ideas were incorporated into those stories in an organic way. I didn't feel that it was not off-putting. And one of the things I think about great storytelling is great storytelling is inherently inclusive. What I've loved about, and I've said it on the show before, when I go to movies, when I go into a movie theater, I constantly marvel that when you go, it's calling a phrase, I think when you go into a movie theater, everybody walks into a movie theater, say you're going to a 500-seat theater, it's Friday night, nobody's paying attention to the race or the sexuality of the people they're sitting right next to. They're all there to see the film. And when the lights go down, it's the great equalizer. The movie doesn't care. The theater doesn't care what color you are, what shape you are, what sexuality you are. The story, though, is the great equalizer. A great story, yes, it will appeal to people in different ways, but there's a universality to great storytelling. And I think that one of the things that's happening now is with all of this agenda-based storytelling is that the sanctity and the authenticity of these stories are being compromised, and the creators of these stories are putting themselves in a position of preaching, proselytizing, or explaining to an audience. It's the same way. No one wants to be mansplained by you, like by me or something. It's condescending, and I don't quite get it, to be honest. I mean, a great story is a great story. You know what it is. But now we live in a world, and I think people are not so much. Look, do Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers and I, do we see eye to eye politically? No. But I have to tell you, my personal dealings with, and even, John Campea was very angry when I streamed with Jeremy, and he told me so. Funny thing is, Jeremy has told me on numerous occasions how John Campea was probably the single biggest influence on him picking up a microphone and founding his own channel. And when Jeremy and I have had conversations, I have had nothing but nice and great exchanges with him. He can be provocative, and his politics obviously are not mine, but and we can have that conversation. But he and I have always been able to talk and been able to exchange ideas. And I guess somebody would chalk that up to the fact that, oh, well, you guys are both white males. But I'm like, we're pretty different. We're pretty different. But at the end of the day, I think what Jeremy wants is what we all want. We want great stories well told, that don't seem to be pandering to us. And but I do think that you are correct. But I've been going to places like San Diego Comic-Con for over 30 years. I've watched the entire makeup of Comic-Con change. Comic-Con has become a far more inclusive place in terms of women, in terms of people of color, in terms of families. And now it's a place for everybody. And I'll tell you, you want to go see what the fandom, there's a great equalizer. Go to the San Diego Comic-Con, and there's all kinds of people there. And it's pretty uplifting. And I think ultimately fans can be that way because we have a shared love of this material. And I think that I really believe that. And I don't think that Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, since you brought him up, hates things because they're inclusive. I think Jeremy doesn't like when inclusion becomes the reason that the story exists. And it's no one likes to be pandered to, and no one likes to be told they're wrong, and no one likes to be I honestly believe the great divide in fandom, give fans the same kind of story integrity that the original creators had when they made whatever it was in the first place that you fell in love with. And I think one of the problems, the problem is that, before George Lucas, rightly or wrongly, dictated what happened in Star Wars. Star Wars was his baby. If he wanted to hire Irving Kershner to direct Empire Strikes Back, he would. If he wanted to make the prequel trilogies and talk about sand being coarse and getting everywhere, he would. When he sold Star Wars to Disney, there was no longer a one creative man and his vision behind it. It was a corporation using marketing technology or whatever to decide what needed to be in Star Wars to make it successful. This is what we have to have. Or it was creators that took one of the most beloved video games ever, like The Last of Us, and injected identity politics into it because that's fashionable, compromising the integrity of the storytelling. And I think that's what the real objections are to. It that's at least the way I see it. I mean, but that doesn't mean you're not wrong. Move forward, live in the past, and die in the past. If someone's childhood can be ruined by a movie, television show, or comic book, they should see a therapist. The old shows, books, and movies are there for fans to see should they wish. Let it go. Let it go. Let God move forward. Live in the past, die in the past. But you know what? Here's the thing. The same childhood stories that we loved, they're still selling to us. And they're still selling to us as 4-quadrant movies. Disney doesn't just want kids to go see Star Wars. Disney wants everyone to go see Star Wars. And also, they have a bent so they have both of those things going, and yet they're making Star Wars that's only going to appeal. They're like, well, everybody will go see Star Wars. That's why we made $2 billion. But ultimately, our Star Wars, we have to only make it appeal to young people because we don't want young people still talking about Luke and Han and Leia and R2 and 3PO when we need new characters because those people are all going to go away. So Disney's trying to have it both ways, and old school fans are like, well, wait a minute. Same is true of Star Trek. I guess, by the way, making fetch happen was not from Clueless. It was actually from Mean Girls. But what they were trying to do, Paramount's whole purpose behind doing Star Trek 09 was to reinvent their IP, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, for a new generation of people. They didn't do that. You can't reinvent Kirk, Spock, and McCoy for a new generation of people by recasting them. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy have existed in pop culture. I mean, Kirk's journey went from 1966 to 1994. Spock himself went all the way through the end of Into Darkness. And I think they're trying to, again, make fetch happen. Let's try and, rather than make something new, they try and go re-energize something by giving us a rehash that isn't as good as the original. So yeah, I don't know. Brendan Sheehy says, and a few normies with balls and circus skills like archery magic tricks stage this WWF-style play to entertain both themselves and the public in a vain attempt to cement their names in the annals of history. Well, there's a lot of true. There's a lot of truth to what you're saying there. I think so. I don't disagree with you. Jonathan Aldridge says, what if your story is portraying something you believe in? It should. It should, but your story still has to be a good story. And I think all great stories have all kinds of issues baked into them. Whether they're social issues or personal issues, stories are, after all, the great stories are, they reveal human truths. That's why they work. Stories are the easiest way to communicate with one another. Especially in a society where language, where you can still talk to somebody and they understand you. If you want to tell somebody a story and have them understand something, that's the easiest way to do so. Is to you have to put in your story something you believe in. But the thing is, it still has to work as a story. And a great story will get those things that you believe in out within the context of the story itself. You don't have to come up and make it so didactic and give us a disclaimer. Just give us a great story. Give us a great story. And, you know, if you want to tell, like, I think about, like, a movie I got that deals with racism in America, Ragtime. It was a favorite movie of mine that I recently picked up on Blu-ray from France. It certainly is about racism and prejudice and institutionalized racism and all that. It's there, but the story being told, and it's pretty overt, the story being told is still a great story, and it's really compelling, and you get it. You get that a component of that story is all about racism and is all about institutional racism and one man fighting against a black man fighting against the system. It's all there, and it's very overt, but the story is great too. And a great story allows an audience member, their own perception comes into play. And a great story is not telling you what you should think. A great story is presenting. Any great story doesn't tell you what to think. It presents a story, it presents a question, and it asks you what you think. That's what I think a great story does. So, Q Muhara DDS. Muhara? Q Muhara DDS, are you a dentist for real? Words of wisdom, sir. Oh, thank you. I don't know which, but you might not have even been talking about me. Insomniac sends in a super chat. Thank you. Jonathan, I answer that. I don't know why these double up. Another person shoes says, how do you explain all the hatred tossed upon Brie Larson and the hundreds of Brie Larson hate videos that are on YouTube? Or the Reddit campaign to give Black Panther bad reviews on Rotten Tomatoes simply due to hatred? How does one explain that? Look, there is a lot of hatred, but Brie Larson, people disliked what Brie Larson said because she came out and she said things publicly like about not having white critics there, I mean, she flat out came out and attacked her own audience. She did. And I understand what she was saying. Look, if nothing else, I want more genre press that is more representative. To me, I've always said on this channel, the more different opinions we get, the better off we're going to be. The marginalized voices, the people that didn't have voices. Look at the Academy Award nominations, which I haven't even talked about on this show. Rather diverse, and a lot of personal stories there. And I think the more we have that, the better off we're going to be. But when, again, you can't trade one oppression for another. So when someone comes out and says, you know what, I'm sick and tired of all these white fanboys. They shouldn't be the ones reviewing the movies. Bring in some more people. As if, look, are that kind of behavior, and that does not help. You're coming in there, and that's why Brie Larson had an actual backlash. The Black Panther thing, I'm a little less understanding of, because I thought the way they introduced Black Panther in Civil War was fucking dope, and I loved the portrayal of T'Challa. I think people love that character. I don't know exactly what spurns or what brought on a backlash against Black Panther, but I know less about that. But yeah, is there racism in the world? Yes. Is there horrible, all kinds of hatred in the world? Yes. And I think it's ridiculous when fans do that kind of shit. I don't understand it, but I understand the Brie Larson thing, because she was openly attacking. When somebody, look, people who love these movies, when suddenly they're listening to the star of the latest movie going, I don't want certain people, it's how it's explained too. Like, I could flat out say, look, I think we need more people of color in all aspects of civilization in our society. I believe that. But then again, it's not like, for instance, you also have to take cultural differences into consideration. Like when I was watching, oh God, that comedian who was just cast on the show with, he used to write for The Late Show. He's a Chinese comedian. I forget his name. Very funny guy. But he was a writer for like The Late Show. Is it Jimmy? I forget it. Very funny stand-up. But a lot of some of the things he talked about was his family and the cultural parts of being Chinese that are expected of him. And there's a lot of pressure there in terms of what you can and can't do and what you're expected to do from your parents. I mean, it's not like every culture is equal. So we're all diverse. We're all different. And first of all, getting into the film business in general is a nightmare. I mean, I don't wish it on anyone. But I think your point's well taken, and I just think we need more people of all kinds involved in things, but we don't tell the people that have already been there that they shouldn't be there anymore. You're going to get a backlash, and I'm not saying it's correct, but it can't be unexpected. Claudius, my man Claudius, who wrote our letters. Rob, you compared Zack Snyder to Preston Tucker, inventor of the Tucker 48, a rear engine, low RPM, 589 engine, hydraulic valves, fuel injection, rear wheel drive, torque converters, self-sealing tubeless tires, and independent springless suspension. I didn't compare Zack Snyder exactly to Tucker. That's not what I was, not entirely. I'm just thinking that I love Tucker. I love that movie. I love what he did, all that innovation, and he was quashed for it should have gone the other way. Alex Sarah says, last thing, Mr. Burnett, diversity is a hot topic. Should lesser-known characters get small budgets to start? Give the existing characters their chance? No, I don't think so. I think that you know what? Again, great stories well told. I don't think Iron Man was a risk, and Iron Man did very well. It made $500 million at the box office. The Crow, I don't know what the box office for The Crow was. Nobody knew. J.O. Barr's comic was very little known when they made that movie. I think it's about the stories. I really do. I think, it's a great story well told. Jonathan Aldridge says, come on, Rob, not all liberals are like that. Of course not. I know not all liberals are like that. But Alex, by the way, about small budgets, I think a great story can have whatever budget it needs, whatever budget it needs to be told well. And, like any movie, who's going to go see it? We have to decide. You read a script, you decide how much we're going to invest in it based on the story itself. So Jonathan Aldridge says that the past can hold you back from moving forward. I know. That's why we have to get out. We have to get past the past. And that's our problem. I mean, look, I feel like I've spent the last 20 years in a stunted state. I thought progress would come much faster with our computer, with the information age. I figured we'd be a lot further along. I'm surprised at how much vitriol and hatred has been fomented around the internet. I would have thought the exact opposite would happen. With all the information that we have existing now and all the people we can meet, all the stuff that we can do, that I would have thought we would have been further along, and it's depressing that we're not. Another person, Shoe, says, didn't conservatives try and cancel rock and roll in the 50s? Yes. Didn't they try and cancel disco in the late 70s? Look at Tipper Gore. Yeah, but was Tipper Gore a conservative? She was a Democrat, right? Look at Tipper Gore. Wasn't Lenny Bruce canceled as well? Why do kids today think responsibility is something new? I don't know. Because nobody has any sense of history. I mean, thank God someone like Lenny Bruce is a secondary character on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, so someone will be like, that guy was a real dude? Like, I can hear his comedy records? You mean Bob Fosse made a movie about that guy? Yes. I don't know why kids... Because, look, you know as well as I do, everybody thinks that they're the only people that ever had that thought at first. You know, and then when you start delving... It's a thing. You know, you get... as you get older, you get wisdom. Kids today, I don't know why they think responsibility is something new. Because, you know, everybody thinks they had those ideas first. Jonathan Renteria became a member. Thank you, Jonathan. Tom Anderson says, Zack Snyder's Justice League moved to 12 a.m. now instead of 11 p.m. PST. Oh, is it? Is that true? That would suck if that's true. I got to look into that. As far as I know, it was always starting at 11, but maybe it is, maybe it's moved. That would suck because that means I'll stay up till 4. Claudius Maximus says, Rob, I hated the drivel in Claudius's letter, the second one you read. I felt like I was listening to Steve Inskeep talk about underprivileged people somewhere. Keep it real, Rob. Speak from the gut. Speak your truthiness and bring the rage. I don't really have rage, though. The only rage I have is for Star Trek. I mean, yeah, I have rage for injustice and the horror humanity visits upon other members of the human race, but you know, Joseph Barrera says, sending some love to the Duke of Discourse. Well, thanks, Joseph. I appreciate that. Jonathan Aldridge says, I was at a Star Trek convention in Birmingham and was excluded by fans, the majority of whom were white. Well, that's distressing to hear. I don't know what that means, though. What does that mean that you were excluded by fans? Like they wouldn't let you in? How did you feel excluded? And I have to tell you, I'm not saying that you weren't, but that's Star Trek conventions are places I've always felt, and I've been going to those for quite some time. We're pretty inclusive. Julian Ortega says, but I'm sorry if that happened to you, which is so strange to me because, I mean, Star Trek, people of color especially, like I've told people on the show that I didn't even understand what racism was. When I found out racism existed, I'm like, I was like, are you telling me that you don't think Nichelle Nichols is hot? She was the first woman I ever had a crush on. Nichelle Nichols and Farrah Fawcett Majors. But Nichelle Nichols had a much better tummy than Farrah Fawcett Majors did, let me tell you. When I saw that exposed midriff in Mirror Mirror for the first time and her green hoop earrings, whoo, let me tell you, and that voice. When somebody told me that there, when I grew up, or I think I was 8, the first time I heard the N-word, I was like, wait a minute. I had a hard time comprehending it. I was like, how do you not know? I mean, Lieutenant Uhura is the female mainstay on the top bridge of the Enterprise. Doesn't that make her like the hottest woman in the known universe? That's kind of how I felt about it. I just thought she was beautiful. I didn't understand that it was beyond me, but strange. Julian Ortega says, hey, Rob, what time are you going to start the Snyder Marathon tomorrow? And would it be possible to come to your live stream and have some drinks? Well, I wasn't going to live stream it. I could, though. I mean, I guess I was going to do it here. You know, maybe I could. It would be fun to turn on a live stream and but it would be kind of weird. Like, I don't want to, the thing is, I don't want to live stream. I want to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. So, I don't know. But I'm probably going to start at 7. If it starts at 11, no, I'd probably start 6, maybe. I have to look. But I'll have to get back to you. Bucati sends in a super chat and says, when I was young, in the 80s and 90s, people just went to the cinemas together to watch movies and have fun. I don't know what happened, really. Yeah, I thought there was a natural evolution occurring, and I think that we were naturally becoming a more inclusive society, a more open society, and I think especially I see it in younger people, they're much more inclusive of all different kinds of people, and it's kind of strange. I don't know what happened. Stubble McShave says, any thoughts on the Oscar nominations? Are you surprised that Tenet was only nominated for production design and visual effects? Yep. I think that I'll check out the Danish movie Another. I can't wait to see Thomas Vinterberg's Another Round. I'm dying to see Another Round. It's interesting that its director, Thomas Vinterberg, got an Oscar nomination. I know, but I really want to see it. That movie looks so great. For those of you who don't know, Another Round is apparently Mads Mikkelsen, Hannibal, or Le Chiffre, and him and his friends, they read some article that if you keep a certain blood alcohol level, like 0.05 or something, that you live better. So they start this experiment where they never let their blood alcohol level drop below a certain level. And, of course, this experiment doesn't go as well as they might have hoped. But, yeah, I can't wait. Maybe I'll talk about it tomorrow. I haven't talked about the Oscars yet. Jonathan Aldridge says, the word racism has little value to me because I've noticed that you can be called a racist for a simple disagreement. I agree, man. And, it depends where you're standing on the planet Earth. Like, what kind of racism? Where? If you go to Asian countries, there are Asian countries that are, I guess you'd call them racist against one another, although I think it's really more culturalist. But I guess maybe, like, it's weird. I just grew up thinking of mankind, the human race, is one race of people. I wish we would understand that that's it. Hey, man, if we can all procreate with each other, we're all the same race. I understand the Cylons and humans could procreate in Battlestar Galactica. It's not the same thing, but we can all have kids with one another. We're all the same race. So I don't understand it. Claudius Maximus says, Robert, I was seething with anger the way Claudius mansplained his opinion on opinions to you. Who the Mephisto does he think he is? My rage keeps me warm on cold nights, and I have to express it. I like this, Claudius. I think you should keep this dual personality going. The ideological column and Smeagol. It's pretty funny. Bob Quall says, left or right, assigning motives to people who grate our sensibilities personally or political is its own kind of bigotry. I think so, too. I agree, Bob. I agree. Jonathan, that was repeated again, but thank you. Claudius says, Monsieur Robert, Brie Larson later clarified her comments. What I'm looking for is to bring more seats up to the table. No one is getting their chair taken away. There's not less seats at the table. There's just more seats at the table. Well, you know what? She had to clarify that. She didn't say it at first. If she had said that up front, she probably would have had less of a problem. But yes, like I like Captain Marvel. I bought her hot toy figure. The one that came with the Flurkin. I don't have a problem with her. But she, you know what though? I do have to say that I don't have a problem with Brie Larson. But when they were promoting, was it Endgame? It was very apparent that she was not down with she wasn't. If you watch those interviews, she was not having as much fun as everybody else. I think that there's a lot of stuff that she's done publicly. Somebody should have taken her aside. She's won an Academy Award. I think she's a very good actress. Maybe Captain Marvel didn't show what kind of a good actress she is, but I don't have a problem with her. Brandon Sheehy says, Rob, I really miss the pulpy stylishness of the 90s. Me too. Leon, Seven, Fight Club. Wouldn't it be awesome if an auteur filmmaker came forth and adopted the style of the 90s, similar to how Tarantino expresses his love of the 60s and 70s cinema? I don't know if it's that different. What I'm missing is just those kinds of movies. I'm missing sort of the idea of movies. Everything now is, all the Academy Award nominees look to be, I haven't seen them all, but they look to be great movies. But where's the big stories? Everything's kind of personal now. I'd love to see a movie like Seven again. DJN says information doesn't change emotions or motivation. You don't think so? You don't think? I mean, I would think that just the opposite. The more information somebody has, people might be able to monitor or temper their emotions or motivations. I think so. Maybe. Paulus Plain says, I just watched John Adams on HBO and I loved it. It's great. I love that. And I love you, man from Norway. I love you, man from Norway. I like that too. 1 day and 11 hours till the Snyder Cut. Is that 4 a.m. Thursday from Zack Snyder's Justice League page? Oh, is that 4 a.m. on Thursday? No, it's supposed to be. Hang on. Let me check this out. Find out. When does debut on HBO Max Pacific Time? Let's see. Zack Snyder's Justice League premiere time on HBO Max confirmed. Okay. Okay, here it is. When asked by a fan when Zack Snyder's Justice League will premiere, the official Snyder Cut account replied, midnight Pacific Daylight Time on 3/18. Okay. On 3/18. For clarity's sake and to avoid confusion, midnight always marks the start of each day, so at 12 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, the film will, in theory, be available, assuming no server crashes happen. Oh, so it's not going to be... For those who can access a bit of patience for the first time, or maybe gear up for a second or third watch, Snyder's going to... Okay, so I guess they're doing it at midnight. I don't know why they said 11, but this seems to be the latest information, so I guess it is midnight. Oh, well, that's... So it is midnight, but they were saying it was going to be, at first, a couple days ago, it was 11 p.m., so there you go, okay. Now you're saying 4 a.m. Thursday, I'm not sure. Jonathan Aldridge says, I've heard the term species used by experts. This is to accommodate multiple ethnicities. Yeah, but you know what? Aren't we the same? We're the same species. You can have, of course, we have multiple ethnicities. That's sure, but we're the same race. Alexander Wilson says, don't forget that Dr. Martin Luther King was voted the most hated man in America in '68. His daughter won't let you forget it. If it wasn't for Dr. King, Nichelle Nichols would have quit Trek. That is true. That is true, and I'm glad she didn't. Yeah, but you know, also Dr. King made himself a public figure, so he was very... Look, Americans, we're a bunch of racist fucks. We have 400 years. I mean, slavery was here. Slavery existed for 400 years. America's not even 400 years old, but slavery was here way before that. It's terrible. So yeah. Claudius says, Robertus of Borg, we can watch the Snyder Cut together on a Zoom call as a collective. Yeah, but that would be distracting. I want to sit down. I want to have a religious personal experience. I want to have a personal experience with the Snyder Cut. That's what I want to do. Chosen Vader Karate and Silver Slytherin Karate sent in a super chat. Thank you. You've done that before, and I very much appreciate that. Listen, my moderator's like, how long are you going to talk for? I've been going on for, I can't believe it's 5 o'clock. What a rollicking conversation this was. I want to thank Claudius for his 2 very thoughtful letters. I mean, I don't know if he's schizophrenic or off of his meds. He always struck me as somebody that was very put together, but apparently he's had some kind of psychotic break. He's playing both sides against the middle. I want to thank him for those great letters. That was so much fun to read them. I had a great time. DJ N sends in a super chat and says, cognitivity information has a harder time changing behavior because feelings are mid-brained, hence internet ruthlessness. Oh, ethnicism is popular. Yeah, look, we're actually probably genetically wired when people look different than we do, just as something that's been bred into us as part of our DNA. We develop that way. and it's probably in our all the way back to our reptilian brains. But I mean, we're beings of intellect. We're smart people. You know, we need to start getting over that. And now is the time. But you're not wrong. Larson's lover says Larson was referring to critics of A Wrinkle in Time, not Captain Marvel, and people like G&G and Mecha Random have made hundreds of hate videos on her one remark. Geez Louise. Yes, they have. Yes, they have. And I understand that. But I look, I still know that there is good in those people, and I like them. And I don't tell them what to stream, and I don't tell them what to say. But whenever I've streamed with those people, I've had a good experience. And even people say, Jeremy has said very complimentary, nice things about John Campea. And how it's funny, I don't think John knows. The one thing about John that I really haven't talked to him about is how many people have told me that John Campea has inspired them to get on YouTube and things like that. So, yes, I mean, I can't comment on what other people do on their own time on their own channels, but all I know is that I've had very civil experiences with everybody. And I think, look, when people have me on, they know me. They know I'm going to try and be the guy the peacemaker and try and, so, and I've enjoyed that. Because I like getting to know people of all different kinds. Claudius says, whoa, species? We are not multiple species. The idea of race is not scientific, it's social. Ethnicity is a better way of understanding cultural differences. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And by the way, I don't believe in being a racist, but I am a culturalist. How about that? That's the way I'm going to be. I don't care what color you are. I don't care about your sexuality. It's all about I don't care about your religious preferences. It's all about your culture, man. No, but we are not a multiple species. I hope I didn't say that. And as far as race, no, we are one. We are the human race. We are one species. But yes, ethnicity is a better way of understanding cultural difference. Like Claudius said, I am no expert. I am no ethnicist. To the extent of, I like that Octavia Butler promoted Afrofuturism in her work. Elizabeth's reading Kindred right now, and I think that's cool. That's another thing. I think we all of us, the more we learn about one another, the better off we are. People are cool. They are. You get a bunch of people together. I'm telling you, you throw a party, the more diverse. When I say diverse, I mean different kinds of people. I don't mean diversity. I'm talking about all different. The more diverse a party, the better it is. So, DJ N says, I've taken care of geniuses that are reduced to toddler tantrums when under duress or devoid of mandated civility. Few people use intelligence intelligently. That I cannot disagree with you, and it bums me out. I think we're always better off. Just take a breath. And look, I've gone a little nuts too myself, but I just think that you can get more out of life. The more people you meet, the more it. I understand. I mean, nowadays I'm meeting more crazy people than I've ever met before. So I don't know why that is, but that's the power of movies, man. As soon as those lights go down, everybody's equal. Movies are the great equalizer. You get a bunch of people that don't know each other into one room, and they're all there for common cause, and they watch a movie. And that's the best thing. That's one of the great things about movies that I've always loved, is it's that great people from all walks of life come together in a room. They're there to sit down and enjoy the film. And that's pretty amazing that the power of movies can do that, get so many disparate people together, watch something collectively. Pretty neat. And on that note, I am going to bring this long-running chat to a close. I want to thank everybody that's here. I want to thank everybody that's written me letters, especially Claudius for that double whammy. Although I'm worried about your sanity now, son. But I thought those are great. I want to thank everybody else that wrote me letters from all over the world. You can write me letters at the Burnettwork.net website. It doesn't cost anything. I want to thank everybody that supports this channel generously through super chats and all of those things. If you like these chats, if you want to say something, please subscribe. Please like. I do read all the comments. Say anything you want. Criticize me any way you want. If you want to write me a letter that's highly critical, as long as you're at least respectful of the other people in this chat, you can tell me anything you want. You want to tell me to go jump off, take a long walk off a short pier, or jump off a cliff, Roadrunner style. I mean, I'll do whatever, Wile E. Coyote style. He doesn't ever know he's running off a cliff. It's by accident. But you know what I mean. You can. I want to thank my moderating staff, beginning with Mike Bodden and, of course, The Richard. And Greg Smith is here. Joshua Levesque is here. Bunyan Snipe is here from the UK. Let's see who else is here. Louise X Sparrow is here. I love that. I love seeing Louise X Sparrow's name. She's one of our newer moderators, and I'm sure she's wondering after today, like, why am I here in this chat? But I want to thank her for being here. And I want to thank you all. Justin Toner, everybody, all the moderating staff, thank you very much for all of that. And we are, for those of you who are members of the channel, we do members-only chats. We're gonna do a members-only Zoom party for our Spoiler Saturday. Talk all about Falcon and the Snowman, Falcon and Winter Soldier. We're gonna do that, so that'll be fun, and all that Saturday. Now remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you,